In Auschwitz, twin children were separated from their mothers and taken to a white laboratory. There, Dr. Josef Mengele measured them, injected unknown substances into their eyes, and surgically sewed two brothers together at the back, attempting to create artificial conjoined twins. Most died in agony. Of approximately 1,500 twin pairs used in his experiments, fewer than 200 survived. This was called science. We are in Nazi Germany, between 1939 and 1945. The Third Reich had built a network of concentration and extermination camps across occupied Europe. In Dachau, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Buchenwald, Ravensbrück, and Sachsenhausen, more than 7,000 prisoners, Jews, Roma, Soviets, Poles, and disabled people, were used as human guinea pigs by doctors who had sworn to save lives. Nazi ideology combined scientific racism with eugenics, the pseudoscience of racial purification. Since 1933, Hitler had enacted forced sterilization laws affecting 400,000 Germans deemed inferior. With the war, the camps became laboratories. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, authorized experiments that conventional medicine would never permit. Doctors saw a unique opportunity: unlimited subjects, no ethics, no limits. Between 1941 and 1943, experiments expanded systematically. Himmler personally commissioned hypothermia studies from Dr. Sigmund Rascher at Dachau. The Luftwaffe wanted to know how to save pilots shot down over the North Sea. At Ravensbrück, doctors like Karl Gebhardt, president of the German Red Cross, performed amputations and bone transplants on Polish women. Nazi science was in full operation. At Dachau, Sigmund Rascher submerged prisoners in tanks of ice-cold water at 3 degrees Celsius to study hypothermia. Some were kept immersed for up to 3 hours. Rascher recorded body temperature as men died. About 300 prisoners participated in these experiments, between 80 and 90 died. Rascher then tested rewarming methods: sunlight, warm animals, naked women. The cruelty was meticulously documented. Josef Mengele was born in 1911 in Günzburg, Bavaria. A doctor of both anthropology and medicine, he was considered brilliant. In May 1943, he arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau as an SS physician. On the train arrival platform, he performed selections. With a wave of his white-gloved hand, he sent prisoners to the gas chamber or forced labor. His obsession with twins and genetic anomalies made him the ultimate symbol of Nazi medicine. Mengele did not act alone. Eduard Wirths coordinated the camp doctors. Karl Clauberg performed mass sterilizations on women, injecting formic acid into their uteruses. He proudly wrote to Himmler that he could sterilize 1,000 women per day. Horst Schumann used X-rays to sterilize men and women. The Kaiser Wilhelm Society, one of Germany's most respected scientific institutions, partly funded the research. In 1942, the Wannsee Conference formalized the final solution. From that point, extermination camps operated at full capacity, and medical experiments intensified. At Dachau, doctors tested vaccines against malaria, tuberculosis, and typhoid fever by deliberately infecting prisoners. At Buchenwald, Walter Schreiber tested poisons in food and poisoned bullets. No ethical boundary remained. The most brutal experiment was documented at Natzweiler-Struthof, France. In 1943, Dr. August Hirt ordered 86 living Jews, men and women, selected from Auschwitz based on skull measurements. They were gassed alive and their skeletons preserved for an anatomical collection at the University of Strasbourg. Hirt intended to scientifically prove the racial inferiority of Jews. When the Allies approached, he ordered the bodies destroyed, too late. Inside the camps, prisoners resisted as best they could. Imprisoned doctors like Polish physician the Ladislaw Deering were forced to collaborate. Others sabotaged experiments, falsified results, and hid victims. Some records were clandestinely preserved by prisoners. Outside, news of the experiments reached the Allies through intelligence reports, but the full magnitude would only be known in 1945. In April 1945, when Allied troops liberated the camps, they found files with detailed experiment records. At Dachau, corpses of hypothermia victims. At Auschwitz, eyes of twins preserved in jars. At Natzweiler, 86 skeletons. Military photographers and doctors documented everything. General Dwight Eisenhower insisted on extensive documentation, anticipating that the world would need irrefutable proof. Eva Moses Kor and her twin sister Miriam arrived at Auschwitz in 1944, aged 10. Mengele selected them as twins. They survived, but Miriam died in 1993 of kidney cancer, a direct consequence of Mengele's mysterious injections. Eva spent decades fighting for recognition. In 1995, she publicly forgave the Nazi doctors, a gesture that divided survivors and historians alike. In December 1946, the doctors' trial at Nuremberg began, the first of 12 subsequent trials. 23 defendants, doctors, SS officers, and administrators. American prosecutor Telford Taylor opened with devastating words, "The defendants are not monsters, they are educated men." 7 were sentenced to hang, including Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal physician. 9 received prison terms. 7 were acquitted. Several Nazi doctors escaped justice. Josef Mengele fled to Argentina in 1949 using false documents. He lived in Brazil and Paraguay for decades, protected by networks of former Nazis. He drowned in Bertioga, São Paulo, in 1979, never having faced trial. Sigmund Rascher was executed by the Nazis themselves in 1945, accused of fraud. Karl Klauberg was captured by the Soviets, released in 1955, and died before facing trial in Germany. In 1947, the Nuremberg judges drafted the Nuremberg Code, 10 principles defining modern medical ethics. The first and most critical, the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. In 1964, the Declaration of Helsinki reinforced these principles. The Orolsen archives, containing 30 million documents, preserve records of 17.5 million Nazi victims, including those of the medical experiments. The legacy of the Nazi experiments is paradoxical and painful. Some data, such as Rascher's hypothermia tables, were used by Allied doctors after the war to save lives. The ethical debate over using data obtained through criminal means persists to this day. The Nuremberg Code revolutionized global clinical research. Today, no medical research on humans can occur without ethical approval and informed consent, a direct consequence of Nazi crimes. Nazi experiments were not the only medical crimes of the 20th century. Between 1932 and 1972, the Tuskegee study left 399 black American men without treatment for syphilis without their consent. In Japan, Unit 731 conducted similar experiments on Chinese prisoners during the war. These cases show that medicine without ethics is not exclusive to one regime, it is a permanent threat whenever power has no limits. Nazi medical experiments represent the darkest chapter in the history of medicine. More than 7,000 victims. Dozens of doctors. A system that turned science into an instrument of racial terror. The Nuremberg Code was born from the ashes of that horror to protect humanity. The victims must not be forgotten, their stories are the foundation of the medical ethics that saves lives to this day. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories.